StraighTAllDay.com.
Tuned in to the show where you learn the discipline to show up day after day, to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there, even when the success you've expected to achieve has yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, you get a huge dose of personal initiative, which is the go-getter energy that moves any one of us, including yourself, to go and make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. And then we put all this together into a series of frameworks, approaches, insights, strategies, and techniques underneath the umbrella of one unified philosophy that's called Work on Your Game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day. Welcome to the show. And today's topic is Be the Buyer. Before we get into this, what it means and what you should do about it, let me remind you of two things. First of all, my daily motivation and Monday motivation messages. Guaranteed to have you focused, sharp, and on point to start your day. Once we start sending that out again, you'll be getting it straight to your phone. If you're a member of my text community, all you got to do to be a member is send the text to the following number, 305-384-6894. And once we start sending that message out again, which will be soon, you'll be getting that straight to your phone. I know we've been saying that for some time, but we will be sending it out again. So just text me and take care of it so it's out of the way. Secondly, Work on Your Game University. That is where I'm looking to work with people who are top 2% performers. Those of you who are seriously ambitious and you're ambitious about making sure you get your mindset in the right place and setting it where it needs to be, making sure that you have a clear strategy to get from where you are to where you want to be because you have big goals, a system so that you can operate in that way on a consistent basis, and you are open to and wanting to be held accountable to implement at the highest possible level because you understand that is what is going to keep you at that high point once you get there, and you can't be complacent, you can't backslide, you can't fall asleep at the wheel because you're being held accountable to perform. Again, I'm looking for people who are looking for this stuff. If that's you, if I'm describing you, you know who you are. If I'm not describing you, you also know who you are. But if I'm describing you, go to workonyourgameuniversity.com. Link is below in the description wherever you are listening to this. With that out the way, let's get into the topic here today, which is Be the Buyer. So I got this idea, this concept was dropped on my ears by a guy by the name of Dan Sullivan, who's an author. And he touched on this point under the heading of getting what you want in life. He was talking about this concept of getting what you want. And he said, well, one of the things you want to do is you want to be the buyer. And I hadn't heard anyone explain it in that way before. And he went on and touched on some parts of it. And I'm going to, of course, what I do whenever I borrow an idea from someone else, I'm going to credit them as I just did. And then I'm going to tell you what I think about it and how you can use it in Work on Your Game style. That's what I'm going to do here today. So the heading is about getting what you want in life. And again, it makes perfect sense because to get what you want in life, just think about it. When you go shopping, for example, and you could be shopping for a car, you could be shopping for an outfit for the weekend, you could be shopping for a husband or a wife. Not to say that you buy them with money, but you get what I'm saying. When you're looking for one, or you're going to the grocery store. When you go shopping, what are you doing? You are making the choice. You are choosing what you want to buy. You go in the grocery store. I went in Whole Foods this morning, and Whole Foods has probably 5,000 items for sale in the store. I didn't buy all 5,000. I knew which ones I wanted. I went in the store, grabbed the ones I wanted, put them in my basket, and I went to the front, and I paid for it, and I left. I chose the ones I wanted. I was being the buyer, and I got exactly what I wanted. I didn't get what Whole Foods wanted to sell me. I got what I wanted to buy. Everybody understand? So today, and this is something actually, being the one who's making the choice and getting what you want, this is the position that you want to put yourself in rather than being in the position of being one of the items sitting on the shelf, like the salad dressing or the coffee beans or the potato chips in the Whole Foods, hoping that someone like me walks by and chooses you. So you don't want to be sitting on the shelf hoping to get chosen. You want to be walking down the aisles, picking what you want off the shelf. All right, that's the position of the buyer. They're the ones who have most of the power. And this is something that we've talked about in the past here, being the one who is doing the choosing instead of hoping to get chosen. Let me see if I can give you an episode where I discussed that. That was episode number 1110, going from chosen to choosing in life. Actually, also in episode 1081, I told you why you were not chosen. Episode number 1047, I said, if you are still waiting to be chosen, why is that? And I also talked about how to get chosen to give a TED Talk. So if you want to know about that too, go listen to episode number 415. So today, let's dive into what it truly means to be the buyer, the one who is making the choice. Point number one, buyers get to choose what they want while sellers are looking for someone to buy, as I just explained. So when you're a pack of gum or some meat, some red meat or some almond milk sitting on the shelf in the grocery store, you are hoping that someone walks by and grabs you off the shelf, puts you in the cart, and they make it all the way to checkout. They scan you and they pay for you. They take you home. You're hoping that that happens. But when you're the buyer, you have 100% choice. Now, you are not waiting for someone to choose you. You have the choice. You can choose whatever you want. You can not choose whatever you don't want, and you only get the things that you want. Isn't that a position that everybody wants to be in? And when you think about it, this is the exact position you're in when you are a consumer. When you're consuming goods, you are choosing the things you want. How many of you ever bought something that you just didn't want? I mean, in the moment you knew you didn't want it, but you bought it anyway. Maybe you bought something and later on you realized, hey, this was a mistake. Maybe you went and got a refund, you sent it back to Amazon or whatever the situation, or you just talked it up to bad decision making and decided you wouldn't make that mistake again. But most of the time when we are making a buying decision, we are buying the thing that we want. Very rarely does anybody buy something that they don't want. So this is the position you want to be in. And to get to the highest levels in any game, everybody, you want to be the person who is doing the choosing, not the one who is looking to get chosen. I just told you episode where I talked about that. And this applies in all aspects of life. As I mentioned in the introduction, jobs, dating, playing sports, selling your products and services, or anything else for which you can get chosen, or you could do the choosing, where you could be on either side. You want to be the one who is on the decision-making side, which is usually the person who is buying, not the person who is selling. Any of you who works in a real estate space, I've had many members of our university, either actively or in the past, who are in the real estate space. And in real estate, they tell me all the time that the buyer it's a different situation. Let's just put it that way. I know a lot of people in real estate. It's a different situation when they are working on behalf of the buyer, because the buyer is the one who is getting to make the choice. They're the one who's giving the money. So they get to choose which house they want to buy. Whereas when you're working with a seller, you are going out and you're kind of sending out as many bat signals as possible to try to get someone to look at and be wanting to buy whatever real estate that you're selling. It's harder when you're on the sales side because you're trying to get someone to choose you. When you're on the buy side, you are getting to choose. There may be 10 homes that are in your price range that are all nice, and you get to pick which one of the 10 you want. Whereas when you're the seller, there may be hundreds of people walking by and looking at your house, and a bunch of people come to your open house, but you have no idea if any of them is going to buy, and really they're the ones who control what ends up happening. So you always want to be the one choosing, not the one who is getting chosen. And looking in these other spaces, jobs, for example, and depending on the market, sometimes this can shift. So when there's a buyer's market simply means that the person who is buying has more options to buy than the people who are selling have options to sell. But even sometimes when you're on the selling side, when we get into this here today, you can still be in the buying position, so to speak, because when there's a seller's market, there are more people who need to buy what you're offering than there are available things to be sold. And I'll give you some examples of that in a moment. So you can still be on the side whether you are actually doing the buying or doing the selling. And this starts with a mentality and the way that you're looking at yourself and the way that you're looking at your approach. When I was playing sports, for example, one thing that I started to not like about being a professional athlete, at least in my experience in my position that I was in, and this is not the same for all athletes, but in the position that I was in, there came a point where I realized that I was on the wrong side of this equation, and I'm describing to you right here. I was on the selling side, but the problem was I was in a buyer's market. As a professional athlete, you are almost always in a buyer's market. I mean, I say always, because there are some exceptions. I'll tell you about the exceptions in a moment. I was not one of the exceptions. I was one of the rules that I was in a buyer's market, meaning there were more people in my position trying to sell themselves into a job as a pro athlete, in other words, trying to get hired to play, than there were available roster spots, which means the teams who were hiring players like me got to be very choosy about which players they picked, because for one spot, there might be 100 players trying to get the job. So they could pick whichever one they wanted. And us 100 who are all trying to get bought, we're waiting there hoping to get chosen. And I realized that at a certain point in my career, about halfway through, I realized that this is the way that the game was set up. And I realized that based on who I was and my pedigree and my track record to that point, as long as I stayed a professional athlete, I would always be on the wrong side of this equation. I did not like being on the wrong side of that equation, which is why I started to look at other alternatives, which led to me creating what became Work on Your Game, incorporated the business itself, not the slogan or hashtag, but the business, because I realized that I would never be on the side, I would never be the buyer if I was trying to be a professional athlete, just hoping that somebody chose me. Now, I told you I would give you some exceptions. Now, there are some athletes who are, because of their track record and because of their presence and who they are in the market, they still get to act like a buyer, even though they're the ones selling themselves. So, for example, LeBron James or Stephen Curry, if they were out there and available to the highest bidder to be on somebody's basketball team, they get to act like a buyer. Why? Because there would be 100 teams in the world, let's just say there were 100 who could afford them, all willing to pay whatever price LeBron says. So LeBron says, okay, I'm a free agent. I'm going to play for whatever team wants to sign me for 1 year, but whoever signs me, you have to pay me $100 million as my salary. Even at that price point, there'll be 100 teams lined up to give LeBron $100 million. Now, there aren't 100 teams out there that probably even have that, but I'm just saying theoretically, They would all be lined up, and LeBron would get to do the choosing as to which team he's going to go play for. Even though they're paying him, he would still get to do the choosing because of his position in the marketplace. You understand? Stephen Curry, same thing. Let's say Kobe, when he was playing, same thing. Michael Jordan, same thing. And there are many other athletes, the name brand people who you can name, they're in this position. Even when they're the ones who are offering their services, they still get to present themselves as buyers. And again, we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go on in today's episode. So when you're selling products and services, anything else for which you can get chosen, you have this dynamic. So in simple terms, what a buyer is, it doesn't always mean the person who is spending the money. As I just gave you an example, LeBron wouldn't be spending money, he'd be making money, but he would still be acting like a buyer. So what I mean when I say a buyer in this context is the person who is deciding whether or not they want to move forward. And the seller is the one, again, hoping that someone wants to move forward. There are two different positions to be in. Most sellers, now I'm just talking transactional here, most sellers are not in a position to choose who gets to buy their stuff. They just want to sell it to anybody who will pay, which again, this is the position that I was in as an athlete. I was like, all right, any team that's willing to sign me, I'll go play for them. Didn't matter who it was, where it was, as long as they were willing to sign me and pay me, I would go play for them. I wasn't picking and choosing which team to sign with. Whereas again, there are other athletes who do get to be in that position. So it depends on your position in the market. Buyers, on the other hand, are deciding what they want to buy, and as they are the ones spending the money and thus the ones with the leverage. And this happens in other spaces too, even when there's not money being spent. Let's say, for example, in the dating marketplace, if there's a woman who is relatively young and very physically attractive, she gets to act like a buyer because she's going to have many male suitors who are interested in her, and a bunch of them are coming up to her when she goes out. They're sending her DMs, and they're interested in taking her on a date and taking her on a vacation or whatever. She gets to choose which one she wants because she has more than one option. And as a general rule, when you have more than one option, you get to behave like a buyer. Now, if a male also can be in this position for a different reason, yes, a male can be physically attractive. That usually is not what leads to them having a ton of suitors in the general sense. Usually it's when a male is noted for his success, noted for his accomplishments, and he's out in the marketplace. Usually he has more than one option. So there are men listening to this who you have multiple options in the marketplace, whether you have chosen one or not. You have options because of who you are and because of what you've done or because of what you do. And there are ladies listening to this, you have multiple options because, again, who you are, what you present, what you offer. And again, with males and females, it is different, that we're not measured on the same scale when it comes to dating. I'll talk about that in other episodes here, but it still is applicable. Let me tell you the episode where I just talked about that for just a few episodes ago. It was episode number 2976 and 2977, Dating Advice for Ambitious Single Men. I was talking to the males, but ladies, you should listen to that episode too, so you understand what people like me are saying to males when it comes to the dating world, those men who are out there playing the field. So you want to be in the position of being a buyer, as I said, as often as possible. And this is much more of a mindset, folks, much more of a mindset and internal posture than it is about your ability to purchase anything or how much money you're willing to spend. That's not what this is really about. It's not about how much credit you have available or how much cash is in your wallet. It's about your mindset and your internal posture, because as I've already explained to you, you can be the one selling and still have the mindset of the buyer if you understand the context. And you do understand the context because I've just given it to you. Let's move on to point number 2. Today's topic, once again, is be the buyer. Always be the buyer. Number 2, position yourself to make decisions, not to be the one to have a decision made about you. Now, for example, I work with a lot of people who may be in the job market. And some of the people that I work with and work on Your Game University are entrepreneurs who are full-time business owners and all-time, that's what they're doing. They run the business that they own. They don't have anyone really choosing them. Sometimes maybe clients and customers, but generally they are owners of their business. But I also work with people who are in a professional space where you are working in a corporate space, or you're working in some type of bureaucratic environment where you are not the boss and you had to get hired to get to the position that you have. And when you're in that position or trying to get one of those positions, well, what are you doing? You're the one who is having a choice made about you. So I know a guy who works at, actually I know a couple guys who work at Google, the internet company. All of you know Google. And there was a guy, last time I heard from him, he was telling me that he got hired at Google. I don't think he said this the last time I heard from him, but he told me that when he got hired, when I think first time I spoke to him, he was trying to get hired at Google. And then he started being interviewed at Google. He told me he went through 8 rounds of interviews. 8 rounds. So 8 different times he had to go to an interview with the people at Google. I don't know if this was physical or it was Zoom, but still, that's a lot of conversations just to get one job. And I just thought that was crazy. I think that's a normal thing now. The way I hear people talking about it in the workspace is that people go through all of these interviews and then sometimes you still don't even get the job. I went to 8 interviews for a job and didn't get the job. I'm gonna be really pissed off. I don't know what I would do. I might have to write an article or do a podcast episode trashing the company for taking up all my time and not getting the job. 8 rounds of interviews? That's crazy. Now you go through 8 rounds of interviews and then you might not get the job. The point is, I'm bringing that up. It flashed through my mind here because this is the position that you don't want to put yourself in too often, of being the one who is having a decision made about you. See, when you're going to a job interview, they're making a decision about you. You're not interviewing them, they're interviewing you. And if they take you through 8 rounds, they're going to make it clear. They're establishing the frame. Like, hey, we're putting you through this ringer of interviews because we're trying to vet whether or not you're worthy of coming and working here. Now, they're not going to say it in so many words, or they might, but that's what they're doing. So when you're in the buyer position, you're the one who is making the decision as to whether things are going to move forward or not. You are not standing in the crowd hoping to be the one who gets chosen. Again, have I made that point strongly enough here today? Remember that this is more of a mindset than it is a strategy, at least at first. All right, it starts with you thinking this way. So even that person who goes through 8 rounds of interviews at a company, you can still have the frame of being the buyer. Now, again, they have all those interviews because they are trying to break your frame if you happen to have it of being a buyer. So they don't like the fact that I'm saying something like this because they don't want any of you showing up to the interview thinking that you're the buyer. They want you to know they're the buyer. And generally, they probably are. But it becomes a strategy once you have adopted and accepted the mentality. You can't execute the strategy until you have the mindset. Now, unfortunately, many people never step into this mentality. So most people are not eligible to make into a strategy because you don't even have a mindset yet. So the strategy is completely useless to you. The key to being able to make this happen is mentally and emotionally putting yourself in a position to where you are okay letting anything that you don't want go in the opposite direction. In other words, you're all right with walking away from a situation because it's not to your liking. Anything that you're willing to walk away from because it's not to your liking, then you are eligible to be the buyer. If you are not willing to walk away from a situation that's not to your liking, you're not eligible to be a buyer because you need the situation, which puts you in a position mentally and emotionally of the seller. You become the seller. Spiritually, you're the seller because that's where your energy is at. Your energy is, I need this situation. Your energy is, I like this situation and I want it, but I don't need it. Now you are eligible to be the buyer. Again, there's more up to the dynamic, depends on who else you're dealing with and why, but that's what makes you eligible. And when I say any situation you're willing to walk away from, I mean, that could be a person, it could be an opportunity, it could be a job, it could be money. Even if you are not in a mental or emotional position to say no to things, when you are not in a mental and emotional position to say no to things, you can't be a buyer. I just told you that. Good news is anyone can put themselves into this mental and emotional state anytime you choose. Ideally, you have already conditioned yourself for this so that you can just turn it on and off like a light switch. It's easier to do if you practiced it, and this is part of doing your homework. And understand that this is indeed a choice. Even better, it's more than a choice, it's a decision. Because once you make a decision, you cut off every other possibility that I'm going to be in a position of the buyer, so I no longer end up in these situations. There was a time back in maybe 2017, 2018. I remember I was doing a speaking gig for an organization that was the organization was doing their event through a type of bureaucracy that I don't really like dealing with. And they were affiliated with the organization that was hiring me to speak. So they hired me to speak. They told me what they could pay me. We negotiated on a fee. This is something that I am less likely to do these days than I would then. We negotiated on a fee and I agreed with them on a fee that was less than what I wanted because they just didn't have the budget for it. And I was okay with everything up to that point. And I'm like, okay, well, pay me my fee. And they said, well, we're going to pay you half now. We got to pay you half after, which I also didn't like. And again, would not go for this now, but I went for it then. And they gave me half of a reduced fee. It was already less than my ideal fee. And then they still didn't give me all the money up front. So they gave me half of the fee. So I got half the money up front. I go do the event, killed it on stage as usual. The event's over and I'm contacting them like a week later, like, hey, where's the rest of my money? And I didn't say it in so many words, but that's what I reached out to know about. And I'm in this email chain with like 6 other people, which this is how you know you're dealing with a bureaucratic organization when there's 6 other people in the email chain who I don't know and have never met. And they're telling me this person got to talk to this person and we're going to get it cleared by that person. Then we'll get this release and then we'll send you a check and all this stuff. And I'm like, and I was getting really annoyed in the process. I started to go off on these people, not too crazy, but enough that they understood exactly where I stood, that I didn't like the fact they were taking too long and getting the money to me. And I told them, listen, I gave you all a discount and I took half the money on a discount. Like, that makes no sense. which was my mistake. I didn't say that to them, but that was my mistake. And I came back to that in a minute with myself. And I'll tell you about what I did. And we'll go back and forth with them a little bit. Finally, they sent me my check. I got half of the money that was less than the money that I even wanted in the first place. And that's when I made some rules for myself. I said, this is not going to happen again. And it wasn't their fault because I don't think they were lying. I don't think they said, hey, we're just going to do this to frustrate Dre. They didn't do it just for me. They would have did this to anybody. And I was probably the only one who ever pushed back on it. They probably did it to everybody else the exact same way. And I said to myself, I'm not doing this anymore. Okay, number one, I'm not going to make the mistake of accepting these discounted rates from organizations. Secondly, if I was to give someone a discount, you give me all my money up front. All right, I'm already giving you a discount, so we're not doing the we got to give you a deposit bullshit. No, give me all my money up front, because if you were giving me a deposit of, let's say, 50%, 50% of my actual fee is more than the entire fee that you're paying. So you already owe me all the money. So I made that rule for myself. Again, this had nothing to do with that organization, because again, I could have just told them no. I didn't tell them no. I went along with it. So whatever they did, the shenanigans they pulled, I'm responsible for those shenanigans because I said yes to doing business with them. I had to take ownership of that. And what I tell you all the time, over here and work on your game, we always come back to the person in the mirror. Even if the people out the window did a whole bunch of bullshit, you're responsible, because who decided to do business with them? You did. So you got to bring it back to you, because I allowed this to happen by agreeing to do business with them in the first place, when I could have just said, no, I want to do business with you. So I made some rules for myself. I'm going to put myself in the position of the buyer, exactly what I'm explaining to you here today, that in the future, when someone comes to me and they offer something similar to what these guys sound like, here are the rules I have in place to make sure that these things don't happen again. And I put those rules in place, and I've been following those rules ever since. And you just got to have some rules. You got to have parameters. You got to have your standards in place, so that when people come to you offering you different things, you already know exactly how to respond to it. And this is especially important in the entrepreneurial space, where anything can happen. In the corporate worlds, or in places where you are part of someone else's system, you can follow the rules that they already have in place. But as an entrepreneur, you must create your own rules. You got to create your own standards. And the good news about that is that your rules and standards can be whatever you want them to be. The key is they just need to be, period. They need to exist. You got to have some. Okay. So anybody can put themselves in this mindset. And again, this is about a decision. It's not a choice. Because if it's a choice, then you might choose the easy route every time. You make a decision, then you got to go with the route that you set and the standards that you set for yourself. Point number 3. Today's topic, once again, is always be the buyer. Number 3, you can sell things with the mindset of a buyer. I already explained this to you. LeBron James, if he was to sell himself to go play basketball, he is the buyer, because he's going to have more options than all the other teams have to find another LeBron. There's only one LeBron, there are 100 teams. So he's the buyer, because he's the one who gets to choose, because he is less replaceable than all the teams are. And you want to be in this position. This is in the case of, let's say, a business or a business person who doesn't allow just anyone to buy their products or services. There are businesses out there in which you can't just walk in and just buy something. You have to know somebody who knows somebody, or you're not even on the short list to get notified when the thing becomes available. So there's cars out there. Let's say a car like a Bugatti. And I'm not really a car person, but I've heard of a Bugatti and I hear people talking about it. So I'm assuming that a Bugatti is a very exclusive car. So some of you probably know a lot more about this stuff than I do. I pay very little attention to these things. But let's say a Bugatti. Let's see if we can find out the price of a Bugatti. So I'm on Bugatti's website right now while I'm talking to you all. So they have a car called the Tourbillon, an automobile made not for the present or even the future. This is for eternity. That's what it says on their website. This is the Bugatti Tourbillon. So let's see what this car is all about. And I'm not even into these types of cars. Personally, I like boxy cars. I don't really like sports cars. I don't like being sitting so low to the ground. But I know a lot of men love these type of vehicles. Not for me. But anyway, let's see if we can find how much these cars cost. Because I'm trying to give you an example here, but I don't know if they even have it on their website. So they got models, customization, ownership. Let's see if it's somewhere over here. I don't think they even tell you the price here. So I'm going to on their website. They have dealers. They have, what is this? Yeah, their mobile website is not the best. So let's click on dealers. So, all right, partner.bugatti.com. So any of you looking to buy a Bugatti, I guess this is where you have to go if you want to buy a Bugatti. And on their website, okay, they got a place in Miami where you can buy a Bugatti. So let's see. So there's a Bugatti official partner that is based in Miami, actually not far from me. Actually, this Bugatti, I can walk here, not far from where I live. So Bugatti, Miami. It is actually right up the street. It's about 10 blocks from me. The Bugatti in Miami, and they have a website. So I'm going to their website of these places. It's a place called Bugatti Miami. Didn't know that they existed. I told you, I'm not a car guy, so I would not be aware of this and don't really care. But maybe I'll go in there one day and just see what the cars look like, see what all the hype is about when it comes to this. But it brings you right back to, it has some pictures of cars in here, but it doesn't say how much the cars cost. I have no idea. All right, so let me see. How much does a Bugatti cost? Okay, so now we're just going to look it up. It says the current Bugatti lineup consists of the Mistral, priced at US $5.38 million. $5.38 million. That's how much the car costs. I guess this is true. Yeah, so I'm looking at the Bugatti website, and they have 6 Bugattis listed on here, and the cheapest one is the Veyron, Vayron, costs $1.9 million. This car. Okay, so the point of it is, the reason I'm bringing all of that up is to say that there are some businesses out there. I would think Bugatti might be one of them. I'm not 100% sure, but I would bet that at their highest end cars, whatever they are, that there's a short list of people who get told when the car is available. They don't make that. They don't just put it out there. They're not running ads on Instagram like, "Hey, get a Bugatti," because they know that most people are not customers for their cars. Most people don't have that kind of money laying around to buy a sports car. So they have a certain list of people who they try to sell their cars to, or they want to sell their cars to, and they let them know when the car is available. It's not like anybody can go buy it. And this exclusivity is something that makes you a buyer. Even when you're the one selling, exclusivity makes you a buyer. I just read a story the other day, as a matter of fact, of, I believe it was Taco Bell. Where did I read? I just read it. Actually, it was this morning. I wake up so early in the morning, it feels like it was yesterday, but it was actually today. So Taco Bell, I read this in this newsletter that I get. This is just about business. That Taco Bell recently opened an early retirement community called the Cantinas, and it's opening it opens next week in San Diego. So when I'm recording this, it'll be open already by the time you hear this. So go look up this place up. It's called the Cantinas. It's in San Diego, and the members of this community, they can play bingo, crochet, and take aerobics classes. It's for elderly retirement communities. So I guess you got to be a certain age, maybe 65 and up. And they sold memberships to this community. And the passes sold out in under 3 minutes. Taco Bell's Cantinas community. That's an example of being the buyer, even though you're selling. You get what I'm saying? So when you create some type of exclusivity or something that just seems like a cool thing for people to be a part of, even though you're the one asking for money, you are the buyer because you're creating an exclusive group. So if you can create exclusivity in any way of what you do, you become the buyer. And there are many other ways to do it as well. And I teach those to people who work with us inside our university. So this is why there are businesses out there who only sell their stuff to a select list of customers. You got to be in the database. If you're not in the database, you can't buy anything that's being sold. Down here in Miami, there are all types of luxury high-rise condominiums going up in this town. And before the building is even completed construction, meaning you can't even walk around in the building yet without a hard hat on because they're still working on it, all the units in the building are already sold. It could be 300, it could be 500. Every unit in the building has already been sold, and people can't even walk in and look at it yet. They already sold all the units. How is that? Because they're acting like the buyer, even though they're the one selling, the people who built the building, because of the exclusivity. So when you can create something that seems exclusive, something that only some people can get, but not everybody has access to, you are the buyer, again, even though you're the one collecting the money. There are businesses out there who have an application process. If you are interested in becoming a customer or client, you got to fill out the application before you could even talk to us. And you're the one trying to give me money, you got to fill out an application to give me money. All right, businesses do this all the time. So to make this work, folks, you got to set parameters for who you would like to work with. All right, if you're just available to anybody and everybody at all times, then you don't have this option. But if you set parameters, then you have the option. So who are the people who you would not accept money from? Who do you not want to work with? Who is out? Who are you banning before they even try? Why would you not accept money from these people? What are the reasons? What are the standards that you have set for? What are the standards you have set for yourself and for them? The more clear your standards and the more strongly you stick to your standards, the more people will respect them, which leads to the right type of people trying to find you because they know that you're excluding others and people love being a part of something that not everyone can be a part of. Again, this is why being a buyer matters so much because not everybody can get in. Not everybody can get to the position of buyer either. So with that said, let's recap today's class, which is always be the buyer. Point number one, buyers get to choose what they want while sellers are looking for someone to buy. At the highest goal of any game, you always want to be the one who is doing the choosing, not the one who is hoping to get chosen. Number two, position yourself to make decisions, not being the one having a decision made about you. This is one thing I didn't like about being a professional athlete. I loved everything else about it, but one thing I didn't like about it was that I was in a position of hoping to get chosen rather than in a position of doing the choosing. And I knew that it was not sustainable for me with my business mind to stay in that space. I needed to be in a place where I was making a decision instead of having the decisions made for or about me. And number three, you can sell things with the mindset of a buyer. I've given you some examples. Taco Bell opened a retirement community. They sold out in 3 minutes. Why? Because they're positioning themselves as buyers. Bugatti. I don't think you could just walk into a Bugatti shop and just write a check and buy a car. Maybe you can, but I would think that they probably have an exclusive list for some of the cars that maybe they don't even make so many of. It might only be 100 made in the whole world or 1,000. They won't sell it to you if you're not one person on the list. If you're not on their list of 10,000 possible buyers, then you can't sell one of the cars when they only made 250 of them, because somebody out of that 10,000, they're going to buy all 250. And since you're not on the list, you can't buy the car. So you can do this in anything that you do when you create some level of exclusivity to where some people can get in and some people can't. Your job is figuring out strategically and creatively what that would be for you that would make people want to be in the group and what also excludes everybody else. And again, I can help you with that. I will help you with that. As you're a member of Work on Your Game University, where you have me as your direct coach, we'll talk about what you're doing, where you're going, what might be in your way right now, what you want to start, how we're going to operate it, and we'll put the whole plan together. And then I'll be right there with you to implement and execute it. That is all at workonyourgameuniversity.com. Work on your game. Dre all